She was supposed to be safe. She was supposed to be smiling at her 14th birthday party, basketball balloons floating above her head, surrounded by classmates who adored her for the light she carried. Instead, Kimani Latig vanished into the kind of silence that should haunt a nation. Kimani Latig was just 13 years old, a straight-A student beloved by her teachers, admired by her classmates for her kindness and empathy. She was the kind of girl who volunteered to watch toddlers during family visits, who helped other students without being asked, and who dreamt of a birthday party themed around her favorite sport, basketball. But behind her warm smile and honor roll certificates was a quiet, ongoing cry for help. A cry that was heard and ignored. Born on March 28, 2011, Kimani lived in a fractured reality. Her parents, Darnell Jones and Tiara Keston, led separate lives. She wasn't raised by either of them. Instead, she bounced between caretakers, her mother's godmother at first, then eventually her grandmother, Dorothy, in Toledo, Ohio. Neither parent had full custody. Dorothy wasn't even her legal guardian until 2024. For years, Kimani was moved from place to place, school to school, leaving behind trails of good grades and concerned teachers. One teacher, Miss Karen Harabedian, remembered Kimani for her quiet resilience, but also for her fear. She was always bruised, Miss Harabedian reported, and terrified to go home. Kimani confided in educators, telling them her home life wasn't safe. Mandatory reports were filed. Child Protective Services were notified. But still, nothing changed. CPS investigators spoke to Dorothy, who allegedly admitted to using physical discipline. Yet, when Kimani was interviewed alone, she told them she felt safe. Was she trying to protect her grandmother? Or was she just too scared to tell the truth? In the months leading up to her disappearance, Kimani was thriving at Spring Elementary. She was nominated for a Kindness Award, a recognition she was supposed to receive in March 2024, mere days before her 14th birthday. She was finally settling into a rhythm, excelling in her studies, playing basketball, and clinging to the hope that her upcoming party might be the start of a new chapter. But someone, or something, was watching, and whatever safety she thought she had found was a lie. This is True Crimes Retells, and today, we unravel a story so twisted, so quietly devastating, that it forces us to ask, how many red flags does it take before a child is truly protected? By the end of this story, you'll be left questioning not just what happened to Kimani Latig, but why the system meant to protect her seemed to look away. Stay with us as we dissect the final days of Kimani's life, the warning signs no one acted on, and the terrifying silence that followed. This isn't just a case of neglect. It's a case that reveals how easy it is for a child to fall through the cracks, even when she's screaming without sound. Before we dive deeper, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a case like this. Like this video if you believe every child deserves to be heard, and tell us in the comments, at what point do you think the system failed Kimani? Your thoughts might just start a conversation that needs to happen. This is the story of Kimani Latig, and this is True Crimes Retells. At Spring Elementary, small cracks in Kimani's carefully guarded world had already begun to show. One of her classmates came forward with a troubling observation. Kimani had arrived at school with visible bruises along her arms. When questioned, she didn't try to hide the truth. She said she'd been fighting with her grandmother, Dorothy. But that was just the surface. Outside the school walls, Kimani's life was often spent in solitude. With her grandmother working long, exhausting hours, Kimani was left alone for most of the day. There were no siblings in the house to keep her company, no nearby friends dropping by. Just 2 dogs, her only companions in the empty home. By all accounts, Kimani was mature beyond her years, responsible and careful. Dorothy trusted her to stay home alone. She had her own set of keys, a phone in case of emergencies, and strict instructions to call her grandmother before going anywhere. According to Dorothy, she always checks in. She always asks for permission. She's a latchkey kid, but she knows how to take care of herself. But even the most responsible child can't always protect themselves from what the world might bring to their doorstep. The last weekend anyone saw Kimani alive started like any other. On Saturday, March 15th, her father, Darnell, dropped her off at her mother, Tiara's house. Darnell later said he had Dorothy's permission to do so. That Saturday, Kimani spent the day with her mother, a rare visit that now lingers like an unsolved piece of a larger puzzle. But it was what happened the following night that still chills the spine. According to Darnell, late that Sunday night, March 16th, he received a call from Kimani. She was scared, frightened. She told him she thought someone was outside, possibly an intruder lurking near the property. The fear in her voice was real, so real that Darnell and his cousin rushed over to Tiara's home to stay with Kimani until 12:30 in the morning. Only once she seemed calm and safe again did they leave. But was she ever truly safe? The very next morning, the nightmare began. When Dorothy returned home from her overnight shift on Monday morning, she instantly knew something was wrong. The front door was unlocked, a red flag for a child known for being careful. Inside, the house was in total disarray. Furniture was shifted, belongings scattered. And then came the most alarming detail. The gas on the stove was on full blast. The house was filling with gas, dangerously close to disaster. There were no flames, but the gas hissed ominously through the burners, filling the air with that heavy, unmistakable smell. Kimani was nowhere to be found. Her house keys were still inside. Her glasses, essential for her to see, lay abandoned near the couch. Her pajamas and underwear were scattered on the dining room floor. Her phone, the lifeline Dorothy insisted she carry, was silent, dead, going straight to voicemail. And perhaps most chilling of all, Kimani never showed up for school. That was not like her, not at all. Panic set in. Dorothy wasted no time and dialed 911. What's your emergency? Yes, I'd like to report a missing person. Okay, what's the address? Address given. Who's missing? My granddaughter. Her name is Kimani. Do you have custody? Yes, I do. How old is she? 13. How long has she been missing? Well, to the best of my understanding, since this morning. I called her school and went up there, but they said she never arrived. Does she have a phone with her? Yes, but it's going straight to voicemail. That phone call marked the official start of Kimani's missing persons case. The clock was ticking. Local news station 13 Action News quickly picked up the story, interviewing Dorothy the very next day. Sitting in her home, her voice heavy with worry, Dorothy tried to make sense of the nightmare unfolding. When I came home, she wasn't here, she said. She should have been on her way to school. But the house, it was a mess, just not how we leave things. The gas was running on the stove. You could smell it the moment you walked in. Her glasses were left by the couch. Her pajamas were on the dining room floor. It was just not normal. She paused, her voice trembling slightly. And she needs those glasses. She wears them every day for school, for everything. By then, authorities had officially classified Kimani Latig as a missing child, but the unsettling details inside that house raised more than just concern. They raised terrifying questions. Who unlocked that door? Who turned on the gas? And why would Kimani leave behind everything she needed? Her glasses, her phone, even her clothes. The story was no longer just about a missing girl. It was quickly becoming something far more sinister. That, as the search for Kimani intensified, more voices came forward. People desperate for answers, clinging to hope, and trying to make sense of a nightmare that kept unraveling. Standing beside Dorothy during one of the first interviews was Kimani's father, Darnell. The cameras caught his face, heavy with tension, as he spoke directly to reporters. His words raised even more questions than they answered. Yeah, she had her own keys, but she left her glasses. And her keys. That don't add up, Darnell said, his voice filled with frustration. She got a phone too, but it's going straight to voicemail. She tried to call me at 1:29, and then she called my girl like 5 times after that. The last call came through at 1:49. Darnell made it clear. Kimani had been frantically trying to reach someone after he left that night, and yet, no one could get to her in time. No one saw her. No one heard from her after those calls. Who was she calling for help? And what exactly was she so afraid of in those final moments? By March 21st, the search for Kimani had spread beyond her family. The community rallied, desperate to bring her home. In Toledo and surrounding cities, volunteers handed out missing person flyers. Her face, young, bright, full of life, was posted on light poles, storefronts, social media feeds. People who never even met Kimani felt the urgency in their bones. Her mother, Tiara, emotionally drained, spoke to the press that day. You could hear the exhaustion in every word. I haven't slept in 3 days. I haven't eaten in 3 days. I've never had a seizure before, but I've had 3 since this started, Tiara confessed, her voice cracking under the weight of her fear and helplessness. Any kind of support helps, even if it's just posting on social media, hanging up a flyer, mentioning her name in conversation. It all matters. As days passed, one thing became painfully clear. Almost no one believed Kimani had simply run away. She was responsible. She had no history of running off. And the chaotic scene inside that house didn't fit the profile of a runaway. From the very beginning, the community and even law enforcement leaned toward one terrifying theory. This was a kidnapping. But who would have taken her, and why? Investigators wasted no time zeroing in on the last known person to see Kimani alive, her father, Darnell. When police interviewed him, Darnell largely repeated what he'd told the media, that he stayed with Kimani until about 12:30 a.m. that night to calm her fears. But as the investigation dug deeper, cracks started to form in his version of events. His details began to shift ever so slightly with each retelling. And then came a disturbing piece of information from Dorothy herself. During one of her police interviews, she mentioned something chilling: Kimani's underwear, which had been lying on the living room floor when Dorothy first arrived home, mysteriously vanished shortly after Darnell had visited the house. Dorothy admitted she didn't think much of it at first, until she realized the underwear was gone after he left. It rattled her, and this revelation instantly pushed Darnell into sharper focus. And when investigators pulled his criminal record, what they found painted a portrait far darker than anyone outside the family may have realized. Journalists Jarrow Cook and Eric Taton from the Toledo Blade compiled Darnell's full criminal history, and what they uncovered was deeply unsettling. His first brush with the law came at 19 years old, a drunken, disorderly charge. And from there, his record snowballed. More public intoxications, increasingly aggressive encounters. Eventually, the violence escalated to arson, or at least almost. He'd originally been charged with setting a fire, but took an Alford plea, pleading guilty to attempted arson to avoid a stiffer sentence. The plea spared him some prison time, but came with strict conditions: community control, mandatory employment, getting his GED, substance abuse treatment, and strict supervision. And then, Darnell's violent tendencies resurfaced. In January 2015, during an argument at Greenbelt Place Apartments, Darnell pulled out a firearm and shot at another man before fleeing the scene. He was quickly apprehended, tried, and sentenced. Once again, he was placed in a work release program, required to find steady work, undergo mental health evaluations, wear an ankle monitor, and remain sober. But self-control wasn't something Darnell seemed capable of maintaining. By November that same year, He violated his community control orders and found himself back in a work release facility. During his time there, his temper boiled over again. After an argument with an officer, he punched a window in anger, shattering it, and earned himself a misdemeanor assault charge. Authorities had no choice but to transfer him to a stricter facility. He was eventually released in June 2017, but barely stayed out of trouble for 2 months. In August 2017, while working on his car, a man confronted Darnell, accusing him of stealing from a family member. The argument turned violent. According to reports, Darnell grabbed an alternator, the heavy metal part from the car, and struck the man directly in the face. The injuries were brutal. Over 20 stitches were needed to close the wounds. Darnell claimed it was self-defense, but that didn't stop the legal consequences. His then-wife, Antonia Sullivan, was interviewed as part of the investigation. Ultimately, Darnell was arrested for felonious assault. He was sentenced to 180 days, but once again his punishment was softened. The sentence was suspended, reduced to probation. Yet, even on probation, Darnell couldn't stay out of trouble. Within 6 months, he was arrested again for drunken disorderly conduct. While awaiting his next hearing, he attempted to break into a woman's home through a window, intoxicated once more. Though the woman chose not to press charges, police arrested him for drunk and disorderly behavior yet again. To make matters worse, officers found an open pocket knife on him, resulting in a charge for carrying a concealed weapon. ETs. Once again, instead of serious prison time, Darnell was sent back into a work release program with more probation and counseling requirements. His rap sheet continued growing, reflecting a man who was impulsive, violent, and repeatedly unable or unwilling to follow the law. And, even more disturbing, his record was now littered with violent assaults, weapons charges, emotional outbursts, and clear patterns of escalating rage. And yet, despite this mountain of red flags, there was more darkness still hiding in his past. By 2019, Darnell and his wife Antonia had moved into an apartment complex in East Toledo. But if anyone thought this fresh start might finally bring peace, the people living around them saw something very different. Their marriage was falling apart, and soon, neighbors would witness just how dangerous Darnell could become behind closed doors. The tension inside Darnell and Antonia's apartment had been simmering for a while, but by July, it finally erupted into a violent storm. Neighbors had grown used to hearing the shouting that rattled the thin apartment walls, but that summer night, the violence escalated beyond screaming. Darnell lost control. Objects went flying across the room. He grabbed Antonia by the neck, choking her in a terrifying rage. Then, in a fit of destructive fury, he hurled not one, but 2 televisions off the second-story balcony. Witnesses later said it looked like he was on the verge of throwing Antonia over that same balcony too. The scene was so chaotic, so violent, that multiple neighbors frantically dialed 911. When police arrived, they found enough evidence at the scene and gathered enough witness statements that they didn't need Antonia to press charges to make an arrest. Darnell was charged with domestic violence and assault. But as these cases often go, many charges were dropped. He ended up pleading guilty to domestic violence and was sentenced to 180 days behind bars. In reality, he barely served any time, just 11 days during the legal process. After that, he was released on probation with orders to attend substance abuse treatment. But even that was short-lived. After another 11 days, his treatment requirement was cut short. He was free once again. Enough. But Darnell's run-ins with the law didn't stop there. The following year in April, things took another dark turn. Darnell was shot in the chest. According to reports, he had trespassed onto a neighbor's property and got into a heated confrontation. Guns were drawn, a shot rang out, and Darnell was rushed to the hospital. But once again, no charges were filed. And still, the cycle of destruction continued. By 2022, police were called to a daycare parking lot where they found Darnell drunk, lying on the ground, this time clutching a firearm. At some point, he'd fired the weapon. He also had drug paraphernalia on him. Yet once again, through a plea deal, most of the charges were dropped. He pled guilty only to attempted possession of a weapon as a felon and using a firearm while intoxicated. His punishment? Just 1 year in prison. That, each time it seemed, the system allowed Darnell to slip through its fingers. But someone close to him was starting to see things she could no longer ignore. His girlfriend, Nina, grew suspicious. During his visits to her house, Darnell started making strange requests, asking her to disable her home security cameras before he arrived. Even more troubling, a family member revealed they saw Darnell stashing something beneath the basement staircase at Nina's home. At first, Nina tried to convince herself that Kimani's disappearance was simply a runaway case, like many others. But her gut told her something different. Then one day, she looked inside that basement closet, and what she found changed everything. There were Darnell's muddy work boots, boots he hadn't used in a long time since he wasn't even working. Next to them was a large rolled-up rubber mat, the kind often used to protect the back seats of cars when they're folded down. Nina's world cracked open. The man she thought she knew, the father she believed cared for his children, was hiding evidence. The moment she realized the weight of what she had stumbled upon, she did the only thing she could. She called the detectives. Police quickly seized the items while Darnell was away. By the time he returned and realized his secret stash was missing, it was too late. He fled. Nina never saw him again. Fearing what Darnell might do if he found out she had turned him in, Nina made the terrifying decision to relocate herself and her daughter. She started over, hiding from the man she once loved. But not long after, Darnell reached out, calling her from a phone number based out of Columbus. She immediately passed this information along to the authorities. Nina's decision to stand with law enforcement instead of shielding a dangerous man may very well have saved countless others. In many cases we've covered here on True Crimes Retells, we see women protect abusive partners, even when horrific crimes have been committed. Nina refused. She chose truth, even when it shattered her world. With Nina's evidence in hand, police finally had enough to act. Court documents revealed that phone records, home searches, and surveillance footage led investigators to issue a warrant for Darnell's arrest on charges of abduction. The warrant was filed on March 23rd. For a while, Darnell's new neighbors on Willard Street believed he was just another quiet guy, harmless, even friendly. The thought that this soft-spoken man could be capable of such horror shook them to their core. Parents and grandparents who lived nearby were horrified. How close they had been living to a monster. But there was still more horror waiting to surface. 3 years before Kimani went missing, in May 2022, a house in East Toledo caught fire. Firefighters rushed to the scene at around 11 p.m., finding the flames concentrated on the second floor, but the fire's cause remained a mystery. Afterward, the house sat abandoned, quiet, decaying, untouched, for nearly 3 years. By May of 2024, the property was deemed a public nuisance. The city issued a demolition warning, citing safety concerns and code violations. For 10 more months, the house stood, lifeless, until everything changed. On March 24th, a body was discovered inside that abandoned house, hidden on the second floor. As the police arrived and sealed off the area, a crowd gathered outside, anxiously waiting. Among them stood Kimani's mother, Tiara, trembling with fear and desperation. She pleaded with officers to tell her something, anything. "They won't tell me nothing. It's nothing to take a picture, nothing to tell me if that's my baby," Tiara cried. The police finally confirmed her worst nightmare. It was Kimani. The details of her death were beyond horrifying. She had been assaulted. Her throat had been slashed so deeply she was nearly decapitated. Her hands had been completely amputated. The autopsy confirmed the fatal wounds were to her neck. When officers broke the news, Tiara collapsed, falling to her knees in grief. The entire city was shaken. Even Toledo's mayor spoke out, his voice heavy with emotion. No one deserves what this young girl went through. I'm not a judge, I'm not a prosecutor. But whoever did this, I hope they throw the book at them. But as police worked, something strange unfolded outside Dorothy Latig's home. A large, angry crowd had gathered, furious and demanding answers. Fearing for her safety, Dorothy was escorted from her home by officers, handcuffed but not arrested. According to police, this was done to safely remove her from the escalating mob. I asked to be handcuffed, just so they would back away from my property, Dorothy explained in an interview. They said they would blow up my house. They said they would do harm to me. It's been a barrage of threats ever since. The community gathered the next day to hold a vigil for Kimani. Dozens came, some who knew her personally, many who didn't. Her former teacher, Karen Harabedian, struggled to find words. I'm sick to my core. I made many reports concerned about her safety. I feared something like this could happen. She was such a sweet girl, always offering me her breakfast, always greeting me with a hug every morning. She just wanted affection. That's all. Karen confirmed that multiple reports had been made to Lucas County Children's Services about Kimani's home life. Each time, nothing was done. Even strangers were moved to speak. One woman, Cher Sweeney, delivered a heartfelt message to the community. We need to listen to our children. Never be afraid to tell us what's going on. We are losing our babies at the hands of adults. It's senseless. City Council member George Serentau echoed the anger, slamming CPS for their failure to act. This tragedy could have been avoided. The press should investigate how many other children like Kimani have been failed. At this point, a statewide BOLO, be on the lookout, was issued for Darnell, but he was already running. It wouldn't be long before authorities caught up with him. As investigators dug deeper into the tragic disappearance and death of 13-year-old Kimani Latig, they started uncovering not only the dark personal betrayals involved, but also a disturbing breakdown within the very system meant to protect her. Shockingly, when Child Protective Services, specifically Lucas County Children's Services, LCCS, reviewed their own records, Kimani's father, Darnell Jones, wasn't even listed as her father. In fact, his name wasn't mentioned anywhere as an active adult in her life. Why such a critical piece of information was missing remains a mystery to this day, and the agency has never fully explained the oversight. But this wasn't just a clerical error. It was a symptom of a much bigger problem. Say these. At the time, LCCS was struggling, overwhelmed by a system buckling under pressure. Staff shortages had plagued the agency for years, made even worse after the pandemic. The workload was brutal. Child service positions are emotionally grueling jobs that pay far less than they should, with long hours spent witnessing heartbreaking situations, poverty, abuse, neglect, even death. Caseworkers are often asked to carry the unbearable weight of other people's suffering. It takes a toll. Yet, turnover rates were high, and when too many workers left, the ones who remained were stretched thinner and thinner, making mistakes, even more likely mistakes that, in Kimani's case, may have cost her life. The Toledo Blade interviewed several LCCS employees who gave the public a rare look behind the curtain. One of them, Sarah Joella, spoke candidly about what it was really like inside the agency. In my unit, we're supposed to have 5 workers. Right now, it's just me and one other person, Sarah said. We used to have 30 workers in rotation, now we're down to 15. She described walking into work every Monday morning and finding 17 or 18 new cases waiting for her, stacked high like silent cries for help. With so many children in crisis following the pandemic and the opioid epidemic, the system simply couldn't keep up. To be clear, none of this excuses what happened to Kimani, but it paints a sobering picture of why these cracks exist and how the system continues to fail the most vulnerable children like her. Audrey Haroon, who manages a youth group home, pointed out another serious flaw: the hiring process. Many perfectly capable candidates are shut out because of rigid degree requirements. Positions often demand a bachelor's degree in social work or a related field, but Audrey believes that real-life experience should carry just as much weight. You have people who aged out of foster care themselves, who've lived through the system, who earned associate degrees but not a bachelor's, she explained. They know the signs, they know the danger. They'd be amazing caseworkers, but they never even get a chance. As public outrage grew, local officials started taking action. Lucas County Commissioner Gherkin and several other leaders proposed forming a task force to dig into the internal failures of their child services agency. They opened up applications to the public, requiring candidates to meet at least one of 5 qualifications: personal experience in the system, professional experience, criminal justice or safety background, mandatory reporter status, or community leadership. The response was immediate. On the first day alone, 30 people applied. By the April 30th deadline, nearly 200 applicants had come forward, eager to help prevent future tragedies like Kimani's. To ensure transparency, 3 key individuals were put in charge of reviewing the applications: Director Brada Osbibor of Lucas County Job and Family Services, Suzette Cowell from the Children's Services Board of Trustees, and Robin Reese, the former executive director of LCCS. Surprisingly, LCCS's current executive director, Randall Muth, wasn't defensive. Instead, he expressed full support for the task force, telling reporters that he hoped to eventually release internal agency records once the investigation and prosecution against Darnell Jones concluded. In his words, "I want the community to see how we responded prior to Kimani's death, and I look forward to that day." Meanwhile, the city of Toledo mourned. The house where Kimani's body was found quickly became a somber memorial. Flowers, candles, plush toys, and balloons covered the property. Some of the balloons heartbreakingly read "Happy Birthday," as Kimani would have turned 14 just 3 days after her remains were discovered. Spray-painted messages marked the crumbling walls. "Her life mattered. You let them silence her. CSB, where's your accountability?" The entire community felt the weight of the tragedy. Patty Mazer, spokesperson for Toledo Public Schools, released a statement on behalf of Spring Elementary after Kimani's death. "The students and staff are deeply saddened by the loss of their friend and classmate, Kimani Latig. She will be remembered as personable, kind, and helpful to others." Counselors and even therapy dogs were brought into the school to help students cope with the overwhelming grief. One of Kimani's close friends, a young girl named Amani, stood outside the school holding a sign that read, "We love you, Kimani." In a soft, broken voice, Amani remembered her friend. "She was smart. She used to help me with my work when I didn't understand it. Now people aren't talking like they used to. Everyone's sad." But even as the community mourned, the criminal investigation was pushing forward. Poor Darnell Jones, Kimani's father, had confessed to his role in her death. Prosecutors charged him with 15 felony counts, including kidnapping, tampering with evidence, assault, and murder. It became Ohio's first death penalty case in over a decade. Despite his confession, Darnell pled not guilty to all charges. Under U.S. law, he remains innocent until proven guilty in court. Defense attorneys David Klukas and Ann Baronis were assigned to represent him. In an unusual twist, Judge Michael R. Golding ordered attorney Klukas and his son, who works for the prosecutor's office, not to discuss the case with one another. Initially, Darnell was held on a $4 million bond, but prosecutors successfully argued for him to be held without bond, citing the severity of the charges and the risk he posed. The judge agreed. Darnell remains behind bars to this day. In some of his early court appearances, Darnell wore what's known as a turtle suit, special jail-issued clothing designed for inmates who may harm themselves or others. Given his prior violent behavior and suicide attempts, this came as no surprise. But Darnell wasn't the only one investigators had their eye on. His cousin, Caleb Jones Dixon, who Darnell claimed had been with him at Dorothy's house the night Kimani disappeared, soon found himself under investigation as well. In early May 2025, police searched Caleb's home, seizing electronic devices, phone records, and GPS data. And the web of suspicion grew even wider. Phone records suggested that Darnell's mother, Linda, may not have been entirely truthful. Though she claimed she hadn't spoken to her son after Kimani went missing, phone logs reportedly tell a different story. Then came Lisa White, a woman who also lived at Dorothy's house and occasionally helped watch over Kimani. Lisa told police she wasn't home the night Kimani vanished. Police seized her phone records too. Right now, no other arrests have been made, but investigators continued to examine these new threads, and with each one, the case grows darker and more tangled. Ganat. As this investigation unfolded, city officials made the decision to demolish the abandoned house where Kimani's body had been discovered. But before the wrecking crew arrived, roughly 20 volunteers rushed to carefully move Kimani's memorial to a safer location with the private property owner's permission. The shrine was preserved. But in a cruel twist, the abandoned house mysteriously caught fire before demolition could be completed. Authorities suspect arson, but that investigation remains open. And the heartbreak didn't end there. Kimani's mother, Tiara, and her grandmother, Dorothy, soon found themselves locked in a painful legal battle this time over who had the right to plan Kimani's funeral. In the end, the court sided with Dorothy, who had cared for Kimani for more than 5 years, while Tiara had remained largely absent. Originally, Kimani's funeral was planned at Brown Legacy Funeral Home, with donations pouring in from a grieving public. Around $6,000 was raised, but those plans eventually fell through, and donations were transferred to Dale Riggs Funeral Home instead. On April 24th, LCCS hosted a memorial service honoring not only Kimani, but other children who had been lost to violence and neglect in Lucas County. Kimani's name was mentioned, but hauntingly no candle was lit in her memory. LCCS Director Randall Muth addressed the audience. And this observance serves as a painful reminder that it takes everyone in our community to keep kids safe. And yet, here we are, gathered again to light candles for the children we've lost. And yet, despite everything we've learned so far, this case is far from over. New leads continue to emerge. Unanswered questions continue to haunt this investigation. Stick with us here on True Crimes Retells, where we will keep following Kimani's heartbreaking case, piece by piece, exposing every twist, every shadow, and every secret that refuses to stay buried. Make sure to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Your thoughts help fuel these vital discussions. Do you believe others in the family may still be hiding the truth?